Hello and welcome to Tablet's Israel Update. It's April 4, 2025. It's been 545 days to this war, about almost exactly a year and a half. I'm Gadi Taub in Budapest, should I say, in an undisclosed secure location. I've not yet been arrested by Shabak, which is a comfort. Maybe that's because I am in Budapest. I'm here with nothing to do with the Prime Minister's visit. And in DC, waiting patiently for me to finish the introduction, is Dr. Mike Duran. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Gadi. How are you?
Yeah, I apologize for the shabby quality of the video. I'm not in my usual studio.
You look a little tired.
I am a little tired. That's because I didn't fly in on Kanaf Tzion, the wing of Zion, which is Netanyahu's Air Force One, or Israel's Air Force One, and that is all the journalists did. I flew here low cost because I'm on another journalistic mission, more of which you will have to wait and find out later.
I was gonna ask you if you were there with Netanyahu, because you're his very good friend now.
Yeah. That's not a compliment for on the Israeli media. I am getting backlash for letting him speak so much. You know, it's not how journalists behave towards Netanyahu in Israel. The minute you open his mouth, he's attacked.
We are, of course, referring to the fact that you got an exclusive over an hour long interview with him about the whole conduct of the war, unlike any interview he's given to anyone else. And so you're telling us that you got backlash from from journalists. Is that, or from where's the backlash coming from?
Oh, you can guess. It's the permanent Never Bibi crowd, because when they interview him, it's like they are competing against each other for who managed to stick it to Netanyahu more than anyone else. And the result is we never hear the prime minister. We never hear him because he has to wade through all these punches in order to get like his first talking point in. And we'll talk about the interview in more detail later. I'll tell you my impressions of it and why I think it's important, beyond the fact that, of course, I think it's amazing to have it on my podcast. We just need to mention that there is a subtitle, a version with English subtitles available on this channel, the Israel Update channel. And if you haven't checked it out yet, you should. Mike, let's start with the headlines.
Okay, so the news this week is rather light, so I just have a few items here that I want to put in front of you, Gadi. One, of course, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu and his wife, Sarah, were greeted with a celebratory ceremony at the presidential palace in Budapest. I say Budapest. You say Budapest. I say Budapest. So you're there at the same time.
You also say Soros, and it's Soros.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Right. What was Budapest called 100 years ago?
Pest Buda.
Okay. All right. So U.S. President Donald Trump, Gadi, said on Thursday that Prime Minister Netanyahu will likely visit the United States soon. He told reporters that it would happen next week, but a White House official subsequently said that it will probably be the week or two after that. Now, the police in Israel are investigating Caatergate, and I want to read to you, Gadi, just to put it in front of us. Not that I think this is actually what's happening, but for our discussion, Avi Issacharov, who writes in Yediot Achronot, wrote that an article entitled "The Muslim Brotherhood in the Prime Minister's Office," right? And he says the realization that Qatar had agents of influence in the most sensitive bureau in the state of Israel sheds light on several other reports from the last few months, particularly reports in the media outlets affiliated with Netanyahu. And those were reports about Egypt. As early as the beginning of the war, questions were raised about Israel's decision to gamble on Qatar as the dominant mediator for a hostage deal and not Egypt. In the last few months, something almost crazy happened, even in terms of biased media or the media that covers Netanyahu favorably. See, that's the biased media, the one that covers Netanyahu favorably.
That's
Again and
me,
again.
Mike.
Again, that's you. Again and again, reports cropped up. This is still Issacharoff. Again and again, reports cropped up about Egyptian preparations to go to war against Israel, preparations that that never actually took place. This story was reported primarily in media outlets affiliated with Netanyahu and primarily by quote-unquote journalists considered his mouthpieces, but not just from them. And now the question comes up, who was behind these reports in Israel? Is it just a coincidence that it was chiefly the journalists considered close to Netanyahu who rushed to report them? Issacharoff concludes, but the bottom line is this. Someone went to the trouble to spread false reports against Egypt by means of Netanyahu's supporting journalists and created serious diplomatic tensions with the state of Israel's most important ally in the Middle East, Egypt, etc., etc., etc. So you see the connection that's being made here, Gadi, is that this Qatardgate, it's not just the influence of the Qataris in the prime minister's office, but it's endangering relations between Israel and Egypt, but also endangering complicating the release of the hostages because they went with the Qatari mediation rather than Egyptian. So there's a whole complex of claims that's being put together here, and of course, all of this was coming out of the direction of Netanyahu. So Issacharoff suggests. And finally, Gadi, also in Yediot Achronot, Yossi Yehoshua writes about Turkey. Quote, Erdogan has set himself strategic goals in Syria, intending and perhaps having the ability to broaden his regional influence, which has the potential of being a threat to Israel by the second largest army in NATO. The key is gaining military control, and to that end, the Turks want to build and control the local bases there, such as the famous T4 base that's in Palmyra. Such control will give them an aerial presence, defense over the Turkish border, but also it will give them control over Syrian airspace, and that will complicate life for Israel. And I think, Gadi, you and I should talk about that a little bit. But back over to you.
Yeah,
Tell us, what should we start with? Should we start with you?
I think we should start with Qatardgate.
With Qatardgate. Okay, good. This is your territory. Tell us what's happening with Qatardgate. I'm assuming you do not agree with Issacharoff.
No, and it's as you were reading it, I just thought, I played back in my head the Russian hoax, and yeah, the Qataris have hijacked Israeli politics exactly like Putin got Trump elected. That's the level. This investigation is a political investigation. Ronen Bar, the head of Shabak, is being dismissed, and when he realized that was coming, he began this investigation, which I think is bogus and jumps from one subject to another. The first thing that they said was that Urich received money from a campaign that Qatar was involved, that Qatar was waging worldwide to legitimize the World Cup in soccer. And
sorry, first you have to tell us who Urich is.
Urich is one of the closest aides of Netanyahu, and some guy that he knew, Srulik Einhorn, has an advertising agency, and he was paid by the American firm which got the Qatari budget to sell the soccer games in Qatar and to improve Qatar's image. So while Netanyahu was in opposition and Urich was not working for him, apparently he did some freelance work for this benign advertising agency, which just got a budget about football in Qatar. Let me remind you that Qatar is not an enemy state and he did nothing wrong. There's no crime here. So in the beginning of this Qatardgate, the police said, now it was transferred to Lav 443, which is the unit that investigates Netanyahu. So we know who these people are. But in the beginning, some spokespeople for the police said, look, we don't know what the crime is because there's nothing illegal about anything Urich did. So now they're trying to reframe the whole thing as if some money that was transferred to another person who worked for Netanyahu went through Ulrich, and it originated with that Qatari campaign. And so it's the trail of the money, and they're trying to reframe this as if Qatar penetrated the prime minister's office and we're running the war in the interests of Qatar. And anyone who knows how things are run in the prime minister's office and who these people are knows that this is completely ridiculous. But what is worrying is that they create, look, this is part of the narrative that, as you know, they're trying to blame Netanyahu for the rise of Hamas by pointing to the Qatari suitcases of cash. So the anti-Netanyahu forces are saying, 7 of October happened, not because we went out of Gaza, but because Netanyahu gave this money to Hamas. So they call him the financer of Hamas, as if there was any other policy to be had vis-a-vis Gaza once you leave it. Because if you leave Gaza, what can you do? Can you just suffocate the whole population? Was there any legitimacy for Israel to enter Gaza with ground forces and take out Hamas? There never was such a thing. So they take this bogus narrative and now they stick it in the public mind to the new narrative. And so I did a short video for my story on Facebook in which I described a man that I met on the airport. And this is how people are brainwashed. He came to me like it's a very a well-groomed guy, and his son are sitting there, and he comes to me hesitatingly, and he said, why do you spread all these lies? And I said, which lie, for example? And he said, don't you realize that that our prime minister is working for Qatar? So that's what is in people. Netanyahu is not even being investigated. He was questioned, by the way. And let me add, they've already arrested a journalist. More of which, when we reach the dumbest mistake, they've arrested a journalist for questioning, and they're scaring people with these threats of investigations. They took Netanyahu out of his own trial for a quick questioning to create this atmosphere of emergency and urgency. And now the Attorney General, which is next to be fired, has issued a statement which he says, it's from Amit Segal, so I'll read it in translation. The Attorney General has said that the decision to end the tenure of the head of Shabak is seriously pguma. Is seriously, what would you say, pguma? Is seriously misguided, and that is tinged by ulterior motives and of a prime minister because of criminal investigation of those close to him, and that the removal of the Shabak head would turn this job into a misrat emun, into a matter of personal loyalty. Because what they're trying to do, just to translate to non-Israelis, they have been trying to say that Netanyahu is firing a loyal professional head of Shabak because he demands personal loyalty instead of loyalty to the job. Because Netanyahu said that he lost trust in his head of Shabak. And now look at the absurdity, Mike. This guy is rebelling against the democratic authority of the government. He is the author of the failure of October 7. And journalists like Avi Zakharov are protecting this ridiculous narrative because ousting Netanyahu is more important than them to winning this war. And
protecting the secret police is the essence of democracy.
Exactly. So now they are, in the name of democracy, they are protecting the superiority of the secret police over civil authority. And this is, and you know, when a smoke came out of my ears when you read this piece from Avi Zakharov, because I should maybe read the tweet when we get to the dumb mistake on the news. I'll read the tweet that I did quoting Avi Zakharov, which is one of the worst anti-Bibi Ralabistim. Explain to the viewers of ours who have forgotten what Ralab is.
It's BB derangement syndrome. But Avi Isakharov, if I'm not mistaken, he also has an earring, doesn't he?
He also writes screenplays. He's one of the authors of Fauda.
He's a screenwriter because he wrote Fauda, which was extremely popular, and he has an earring. So shouldn't you feel some kind of fellowship with him?
No, competition, not fellowship, Mike.
It's competition. Okay.
But I felt while you were reading the news that you were treating it more lightly than Israelis do, and I felt that when you said there's not much news today, because I just got a text message from a very bright woman journalist whom you know, but we can't mention because she didn't. I don't have her permission to quote her, and she said, "Are we facing a coup?" Because now the Attorney General is saying that the dismissal of Ronen Bar is not kosher. So are they going to try to use their invented incapacitation clause in order to remove Netanyahu? And people are talking in Israel of how close are we to the Praetorian Guard, which answers to Ronen Bar, which is Netanyahu's bodyguards. How close are we to them arresting Netanyahu? I don't think this will happen, but the atmosphere has certainly got there when you have the former legendary head of the Supreme Court, the president of the Supreme Court, Aaron Barak, said, maybe the only solution now is a civil war. So they're legitimizing this. And also, I might add that we had a very unpleasant incident with one of the leaders of the protest, sexually harassing a Magav, a border patrol woman soldier in the midst of a demonstration. And now I
didn't see this. Sexually harassing means what?
I don't know how to describe it. In a non too graphic way. She was bending over and he was humping her from behind with a megaphone in his hand. And apparently now the powers that be in law enforcement and the opposition, including the feminists, are saying, well, we need more evidence. We can't see we can't see if the contact was exactly friction and all that. And then they searched his house and they found a Kalashnikov, an illegal handgun, and tons of ammunition. And these people are talking about civil war all the time. And they think, this is the guy when in the middle of the protest, they stole a tank. They stole a tank from the Museum of the Armored Division as part of their anti-Netanyahu protest, and nothing was done to them because, they're the good old boys. They call themselves, this particular movement, they call themselves the veterans of the Yom Kippur War. So, but they're from the right tribe and nothing will happen to them. And so a lot of Israelis are thinking that things are spinning out of control.
Stealing a tank is pretty impressive. You've got to give him credit for that.
It weighs, I think, 72 tons, they said.
Yeah, not everybody can do that. The only other time I heard of someone stealing a tank was in World War II when the Americans were in Naples. There was a tank or two stolen by the Neapolitans. They're especially good at stealing things. So, all right. Now, I just want to add my 2 cents to this.
Sure.
Just the Isakharov business, all the stuff that this web of accusations that's being woven. I don't believe any of it for my own reasons. I cannot. I had a series of conversations over the last year with someone, let's say, close to Netanyahu, about Qatar, about Egypt, and so on. And there was this idea that they are putting out these messages about Qatar and Egypt and so on. It's nonsensical. It doesn't add up with what I've seen with my own eyes. Okay, and that's number one. Number two, as usual, I never jump on the bash Qatar bandwagon. There are things to criticize Qatar about, just like there are things to criticize everyone about. I'm not saying they're perfect or want to defend everything they do, but there's this whole machine out there now that's going after Qatar, and I think it's mistaken. It's mistaken. It's because I don't think that the Qataris themselves behave, whether you like them or don't like them, I don't think that they behave in the way that they are being presented as this big nefarious operation. Their modus operandi is really quite different, and I've seen it up close when I worked in government. So I just don't buy it. And none of this strikes me as true.
Yeah, and it's the way the unequal way in which law is enforced and reported on in Israel it's mind-boggling, because the Benny Gantz and Ram Ben Barak, Benny Gantz, former what do they call Rosh Memshalah Khalifi, substitute prime minister with Netanyahu, had a company called the Fifth Dimension. And there should have been a criminal investigation on their receiving a lot of money from the police without tender. But they tried to sell their cyber product to the Qataris, by the way, through the agency of a former American general named John Allen. And they're trying to sell weapons to the Qataris. And then someone gets advertising budgets in order to promote soccer in Qatar, and everybody's jumping on it. And if that's not enough, Mike, the absurdity is not enough, then one of the advisors to the committee of the families, the committee of the families of the hostages, one of their advisors is receiving money directly from Qatar, and nobody's talking about that. So you see, it's clearly, as Netanyahu said in a short video, he fired Ronen Bar, and Ronen Bar started an investigation against him. That's a page from James Comey's book. It's exactly the same. They couldn't hang it on Trump, so they investigated his close vicinity, and lo and behold, they've taken Urich's telephone. So they're now penetrating Netanyahu's office through a bogus investigation in order to tie his hands. And let me remind you, because you wrote on that Russian collusion hoax, I think you were the first to understand what was going on there. And the minute Trump fired Comey, what happened? He himself was suddenly under investigation and could not do anything against the Mueller special counsel. So it's the same thing. It's very investigation started after Bravo's
burger in the end.
Yeah, but people, since the media is so biased, and you see Avi Sakharov, they're willing to sell to people. And then I meet someone at the airport, and what simple people have in their minds, being brainwashed with this, is Netanyahu is selling us to the Qatari. That is why October 7 happened. Did you know that, Mike?
I just wanted to point out, when you talked about the Fifth Dimension, you mentioned Ram Ben Barak, who's the former Mossad deputy head of the Mossad, number 2 in Yesh Atid. Yeah. So card-carrying member from kibbutz, or is it not kibbutz? What do you call it? Nahalal is a.
It's a moshav, I think. Yeah, but it's
moshav. Famous moshav of Moshe.
The origins of the aristocracy of the pioneers.
Yeah, so he's absolutely the card-carrying member of the security establishment. Okay. Right. Yes. So, Gadi, let's move on to your interview.
Enough about Milan, and now let's talk about my work. Yeah,
let's talk about your work. Really, that was an amazing get. You got that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about it. Come on.
So it's the second time that my podcast host Netanyahu. I had my 100th episode was with Netanyahu when he was the head of the opposition, and now this is the 300th episode, and for the first time, he laid out the whole trajectory of the war. And what is amazing, Mike, is that we are a year and a half into the war, and we have not had a chance to hear what the prime minister thinks, what he plans, and how he understands the situation. The only way we can hear what he thinks is through short videos that he releases from his office. They're usually 1 or 2 minutes, and they're usually targeted at a specific occurrence or a specific dilemma or a specific decision. And what he did in this interview was just lay out the whole thing. Now, I did not realize that this was what was going to happen, because we were set to talk about the geopolitical changes in the Middle East. You would have been perfectly happy with the subject.
You had asked him for an interview, or someone else set it up?
They have a permanent request from me, and I said to him too. I said, the 300th episode is coming up. You should appear on it. And well, I'll tell you the story, because it's and then they decided to grant it, and then, I mean, he did, and his staff informed me that if I want to do it, then the Prime Minister will meet me in 2 hours in his office. Now, I was in Petach Tikva, which is, I guess, 30 minutes away from my own house, with torn jeans, denims, and I said, "That's in 2 hours, guys, and I'm not even dressed for it." And they said, "Well, try to make it then." And I don't even have a filming crew, so a videographer. So I rushed to arrange it. I rushed to my house to change my pants, and I get there on time. And the topic we decided to speak about was the geopolitical changes in the Middle East, because, as you know, and as we say, the Israeli public, since the media is so hostile, they call it Memshelet HaChurban, the government of ruin, and it's the Churban is Churban Habayit, it's the destruction of the temple. So it's the destruction government. So people don't realize the amazing achievement of the Netanyahu government, which completely changed Israel's geopolitical situation in the Middle East. And you and I, of course, for our listeners, this is trivial. We talk about this all the time because it's the most important thing to talk about. And Israelis have not heard about it. So I said, let's talk about this because this is important. And as we sat, and then the staff told us, he has a telephone call with the Secretary of State, which I joked about somewhere in the podcast, so we had half an hour, and I said, okay, let's do this fast. And my guy, the videographer, is getting ready, and we're setting it up as quickly as we can. And then he starts laying out the story of the war. And by the time our half an hour has elapsed, and the Secretary of State, that's Marco Rubio, if you haven't checked that out, is ready for the call, we only got to the grim beeper. And so I have half the story. And then the Prime Minister gets up to go to take the call, and he doesn't say, okay, thank you very much. He says, we'll take a break. So I understand I have another half. And after he got into it, he was feeling good about it. Yeah, because he was enjoying it. I think that he too realized that it's a chance to tell the whole story. And there's another indication of that. He did not settle any scores with anybody. He did not mention a single name. And God knows he has, except Biden, except President. I was going to say, you mean he didn't settle any scores with Israeli officials? Is what you're saying. Yeah, and God knows he has a stomach full of these people who are sabotaging policy half the time in cooperation with the Biden administration and undermining his war effort. But he just sidestepped all of this, described all the dilemmas as legitimate, because there were legitimate arguments to every dilemma, to both sides of every dilemma, and just laid out the story. And then he took the call, when he finished the call and we're going back into his office, Roman Goffman, who is the Mazkir Tzvai, said, "How long are you guys going to be?" Because a lot of people are waiting. The military advisor, secretary. The military attaché. It's the attaché, yeah. And I told him 12 minutes. We need 12 minutes, and we talked another 40, and people were waiting outside. I'm saying this only because I think the Prime Minister realized that this is a testimony for history of sorts, and he wanted to be clear. At the end of the break, he came back with a list of all the decisions, so he doesn't miss any crucial decision that he took during the whole war. And not to belabor the backdrop at the expense of the content. What I think one can see is that he had an unbelievable challenge in sustaining the war effort against all forces that wanted to make him stop. And
they were trying so hard. We cataloged it here. All the
our listeners
chronicled it here.
And this is it's a difficult mission to advertise, because nobody wants to continue wars. But the mission was to keep the war alive, so that it would be brought from Gaza to Lebanon to Syria and to the outskirts of Tehran, basically. And then there's this job to finish, which we know what the dilemmas are now. And obviously, he would not disclose anything about where things stand between him and President Trump regarding a possible attack on the Iranian nuclear facilities. The only thing he said is that when I said, well, Prime Minister, if there is an agreement with peace, not like the JCPOA, but an agreement that will guarantee the complete dismantling of the centrifuges, would Israel be content with that and refrain from attacking Iran? And you see, he paused, and the only thing he said was, "Do you trust the Iranians?" And that's it. That's what he said, and you can understand what this is. The one other thing I want to mention is that he laid out the disagreements with Biden. By the way, he said, I do appreciate what the Americans did do for us and what the Biden administration did do for us. But when he laid that out, he repeatedly came back to the point of where his advisors, his partners to the coalition, the opposition said, don't defy the United States. And he said, no, we must defy them when we need to, because otherwise we'd be a vassal state, and a vassal state would not survive in this region. And when you look back at Netanyahu from the 90s, when he defied Madeleine Albright, to when he defied President Obama and came to speak before the joint session of the two houses of Congress, to where he defied Biden and said, we will go into Rafah even if we have to fight with our nails. He had always made it clear that even in the face of American pressure, as the Prime Minister of Israel, he would take care of the interests of the state of Israel over and against objections when he needs to. And that is a very, very important statement, because when his coalition said, for instance, before the Nasrallah assassination, said to him, okay, but let's inform the Americans beforehand. He said, no way. And he said, we informed them only after the airplanes were on the way. And there's a whole story about that, how he took that decision. Yeah. Please consult the video and you will see, because it's an amazing story how that decision was reached.
Well, he's 100% correct about being a vassal state. If if the Iranians see that they can restrain Israel through the Americans, then you've lost all deterrence. Gadi, you said there was a lot of backlash. Anything that was, anything that was actually disturbing to you in any way, or was it just amusing?
There are a lot of things that I would have liked to talk about and a lot of things that I would have liked to ask. But I felt, sitting there and interviewed him, I felt a conflict between the journalist in me and the historian in me, because knowing a little bit about Netanyahu's style, if I began pushing him into corners, I would not get the story. And there are difficult questions that need to be asked. But I said repeatedly since this war began, we are in the midst of a war. And this is a wartime prime minister. it is not the job of journalists to prove their mantle by stabbing him. And so
you're not a journalist. You're not a journalist anyway. It's not your job.
And I didn't, even as a historian, there are a lot of things I think need to be asked. But the obsession now with the question of responsibility is, in my mind, this is like the Yom Kippur War. This can wait till after the war, because you see that this is an issue that the opposition is trying to leverage into removing Netanyahu from office. And there was a statement in the way I conducted this interview, because the first they other outlets kept wanting to interview me about the interview. So, and that was like a victory lap, Channel 12 suddenly called and said, "Can we have a piece of the interview?" And I said, "You can take 20 seconds, 60 seconds. I'm sorry, 1 minute you can take," because it's a statement by Netanyahu that he grants a full, leisurely 1 hour, 10-minute interview to, with all due respect to my own outlet, a private podcast, which is run by a single person and not the huge news outlets. And he follows the footsteps of Trump. And that's a declaration. Trump went to Joe Rogan and just ignored CNN and MSNBC and even Fox. And Netanyahu, who's been hounded by the Israeli press like no one ever in the history of Israel, is just saying, if you just want to attack me and I can never finish a sentence, I will go somewhere where I can finish a sentence. And consciously, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to hear the prime minister's version from A to Z, and whatever people say now, for the record of history, that's the first draft. And hopefully, if I were a historian and I could go back and I had a 1 hour and 10-minute video of President Lincoln explaining the Civil War, then I would be very pissed off if some interviewer were to disrupt his ability to tell the story.
Right, absolutely. Any of the reactions that you got, other than what you said, were any of the reactions positive or negative, interesting or amusing, that you want to tell us about? Or
a lot of people were grateful. A lot of people were grateful because Netanyahu is demonized all the time, and it's like the way Trump is treated by the media. You always get snippets of like some slip of the tongue or some outrageous soundbite. You don't get them to lay out their full argument. And Netanyahu is an intellectual, and he is a very, very sophisticated political operator and statesman. It's like, there are not many statesmen of this level. And suddenly people hear him think aloud. Netanyahu has a very clear philosophy about the media. He doesn't trust it. And he always comes with talking points to interviews on the media. And suddenly you just hear the man think out loud. And you can see you saw how it transpired. It was a leisurely conversation in which he was thinking out loud and doing his best to explain himself and explain the situation. And it's just, it's a tour of the war through the eyes of the most important decision maker of the whole event. And it's fascinating. So people,
all right, well, yeah, it's fantastic. Good for our podcast too, since we got the
exclusive.
Yes.
And I think Tablet will run the transcript too.
Okay, good. That's great. So should we move on and talk a little bit about Turkey?
Yeah. Cold Turkey has got me on the run. You know that song by John Lennon? No. I was reminded of you because I was wondering what you're going to say about Turkey. Because in Israel, people are, outraged.
Yeah, I'm a bit worried. I'm worried. I'm more worried than I've ever been about the Israel-Turkey. Yeah. They clearly have, you heard President Erdogan's prayer last weekend where he prayed for the destruction of Zionist Israel. Yeah. That's takes the rhetoric to a new level. Clearly, I think for me, even more disturbing than that rhetoric, which is, of course, very disturbing, but is my understanding of the Turkish desires in Syria. I think that they really do want to move into the military bases, not just T4 that I mentioned in the news, but also they want to take over I think they want to take over the Russian bases, the Hamamim Air Base and Tartus naval base.
Mike, for those of us who are not as occurrent on the geography, tell us what this means exactly.
Basically, they want to forget about the names of the bases and where the bases are, but basically, I think there is a strong Turkish desire to turn Syria into a Turkish base. That's which is, of course, totally unacceptable to the Israelis. And the Turks are not talking to the Israelis. I think that's the most disturbing thing here. So the Israelis are carrying out military operations in Syria to make the bases inoperable. Like they bombed the T4 a couple of times here, and so the Turks can't move in and start flying drones or planes from the runways. But at some point, if this continues and they keep there's a brinksmanship, at some point Turks are going to be on the ground paving the runways, and one of them is going to get killed, or some of them are going to get killed by Israeli airstrikes, and then it's going to be a very a major crisis. We're also, when you don't have there's no deconfliction mechanism between the Turks and the Israelis, so you've got Turkish airplanes and Israeli airplanes, I'm presuming, flying in the same airspace. Bad things can happen very quickly. Like you had the Russian-Turkish, the Turks shot down a Russian fighter jet back in 2015, and so or 2016 was it? Anyway, 2015, I think. So the chance of a mistake and then a serious escalation, the chance of a war, I think is not. I wouldn't say it's very high, because I don't think either side wants a war, but but there's a serious chance of it. Fortunately, today, Hakan Fidan, today Friday, the secretary, that's not Secretary of State. What do we have in Turkey? We have the foreign minister. The foreign minister put out a statement saying that Turkey does not want a conflict with Israel and Syria, and he said it's up to the Syrians to decide what they want. Of course, the Turks are whispering in the ears of the Syrians about what they should want. So we'll have to wait and see. But that could be, I think that is a sign. It's at least a signal that the Turks are open to some kind of, it's a signal that they're possibly open to some kind of an arrangement. What I think the Israelis really want is they would like the Americans. Well, they would like the Turks to open a deconfliction channel with them. The Turks won't do that. So I think the second desire of the Israelis would be for the Americans to step in and mediate. At the moment, I don't think it's really, the Americans have a serious Syria policy. And that is my number one recommendation. I do, first and foremost, American foreign policy. What I really want to see is a very serious effort by Donald Trump to mediate, not so much to mediate, but to buffer and to push the Turks and the Israelis away from each other.
Do you still believe that the interest of Turkey and the interest of Israel can be reconciled within the American system of alliances? Because I defend your opinions halfway, Mike, because I'm considered in Israel.
Because you're a loyal friend.
I'm a loyal friend, and I'm considered your representatives on earth. Is on the ground in Israel. And so I keep saying I don't share Mike's opinions on this, on all of this, and I'm not an expert on it. But what I do say is that you are not saying that the Israelis should hug the Turks or should make any concession to the Turks. What you are saying is that there are ways to avoid unnecessary friction.
That's exactly what my position has always been. It is that I thought that a lot of the ways in which the Israelis were sending signals to Tehran was to Ankara was counterproductive. And a lot of the signaling, it has to be signaling to Washington. The Israelis need to, and the Turks as well, by the way, they need to tell Washington what its role is. I don't think that the Trump administration yet knows what its role is. The United States has two major allies in the Middle East. It has only two, as I've said here many times, with militaries that can project power beyond their borders. That's Turkey and Israel, and they're now bumping up against each other quite significantly in Syria. It's the job of the United States to prevent that from happening. But I don't think that the Trump administration knows that. And I don't think
Do you think that Netanyahu sees the American role that way, or does Netanyahu want the Americans to just pressure Turkey?
Well, if you ask the Turks what they would want, they would say, they would like America to tell Israel to sit down and shut up. And if you ask Netanyahu what the United States should do, they should really, tell the Turks to sit down and shut up. But however they express it, I'm sure, especially Netanyahu, I'm sure that he wants an American role there, because only America can change the calculus of Ankara. I don't think Israel has it in its ability to really change that. At one time, I thought the Israelis, through a different, playing their hands differently, had a chance of changing the calculus in Ankara. I no longer see it that way. I think that the aspirations of the Turks in Syria are such that Israel should be very worried and should be doing everything it can to tell Donald Trump to help out. I assume that at the top of that number 2 on Netanyahu's list when he comes to see Trump, either next week, week after, or 2 weeks from now, is Turkey. I assume that Iran is number 1 always, but Turkey now is a very close number 2. It's very dicey right now between Israel and Turkey. Very dicey.
And do you expect this to go away, or are we just on a collision course which the Americans could maybe postpone but not prevent?
I do not think anything. I do not think a collision is inevitable, but I would say at the moment, Turkey and Israel are on a collision course.
That is very worrying, because Turkey is, in a sense, a more serious threat than Iran. They're less crazy, and possibly less reckless, but they are a much stronger and more stable state, and they have an actual military. Well, Iran Iran is like a bee. It has a narrow ability to sting, to produce a very deadly sting, but it's not able to sustain any military effort.
Turks are enormously powerful. I think they're the most powerful country in the Middle East, more powerful than Israel. Israel has some military assets, know-how, capabilities that the Turks don't have. F-35, for example, cyber capabilities the Turks don't have, and so on. But as you saw in Turkey, in Syria, the Turks have a ground game that Israel doesn't have and just can't have by the nature of its society, identity, size, and so on. The Turks look where they're operating simultaneously. They're in Libya, they're in the Horn of Africa, they're in Syria, and look how they just sort of took ownership of Syria. Israel can't play that game.
So we'll have to follow this. It's indeed very worrying. Shall we? dumb mistake?
Just so you know, we can go on to the dumb mistake, but just let me clarify one thing. When I said collision course, I still don't think that I have not converted to the Dan Shuftan view that Turkey is primarily an ideological actor working to carry out a Muslim Brotherhood revolution in the Middle East. I don't see it that way. I think there's still a pragmatic streak, but I would say I've moved a notch or two closer to Dan Shuftan than when we had our debate here.
Yeah, which was our most popular episode yet, second only to the Netanyahu interview with the English subtitles.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
I think Dan reached. I think the same, just under the Netanyahu one. So the dumb mistake. Do you have a dumb mistake, or do you want me to take two?
I have a dumb mistake. You can. Do you want to take two? I have one. If you.
I'll start with one, then you go, and I'll go last. So we mentioned Avi Sakharov. Avi Sakharov wrote that armies and intelligence agencies around the world operate units, the aim of which is to influence the enemy's, he doesn't say mind, but that's what he means, I think, in order to weaken him from the inside. In the case of Catatergate, a state that is a terror sponsor who sponsors Hamas, who perpetrated the I'm shortening it, the October 7, had operated the closest advisors of Bibi, he calls them by the nickname, in order to influence us, the citizens of Israel.
I'm sorry. I actually, by the way, I know Avi. I actually like him, but this is garbage. This is such garbage.
And he says this is sick in another level. And what I wrote, so the dumb mistake is mine. And I wrote, why do we need foreign influence to weaken us from within when we have people like you, Avi Sakharov, who do it anyway? Because that's what I think they're doing. That's the Israeli press has been working to weaken Israel from within. And when I say that, people think that's outrageous. But read them. At every single point in this war, the mainstream press was attacking only their own side. All their barbs are pointed to us. And most recently, the chief commentator on legal matters on Channel 2, which is the most watched news, basically said that the real enemy is the Netanyahu government. And sure, Hamas and Hezbollah are also enemy, but this is the real enemy. So imagine this is the most watched channel, and this is the line that they promote. He just said it out loud. The others didn't dare say it, but that's mind-boggling. Yes, Mike, over to you.
Okay, so we're from Relevit to Trump derangement. So from Bibi derangement syndrome to Trump derangement syndrome. Don't ask me why. I happened to read a column by David French in the New York Times. David French he's an evangelical. He's in the sort of Max Boot, Jennifer Rubin school, conservative who became anti-Trump and then was embraced by the left-wing media for being principled, I suppose is the word that they would say. I believe that he actually believes everything he's saying, by the way. I met him one time. I don't really know him at all. But I think he believes this. It jumped out at me. It's not really about the Middle East, but in 2016, this is him writing his column yesterday. In 2016, Trump won 80% of the white evangelical vote. Now, note, I think I mentioned that French is himself evangelical. The rest of America voted for Hillary Clinton by a 26% point margin, 60-34. In 2024, Trump won 82% of white evangelicals. So he's gone up 2%, Trump, with the evangelicals, and 40% of everyone else. After almost 10 long years during which Trump has captured evangelical hearts more than any other president of my lifetime, I am forced to admit that Trump may have been better attuned to conservative evangelical culture than any other Republican president in modern era. But this doesn't mean what you think it means. It means that this is just a testament to how horribly rotten evangelical culture is, right? His bond with evangelicals isn't just a result of flawed theology. It's a result of the broken culture that flawed theology helped create. And in some parts of American Christianity, the theology is so flawed and the culture is so broken that evangelicals don't see Trump contradicting their values at all. He's exactly like the men and women who lead their church. And he gave some examples of corrupt pastors and so on. So I just thought this was funny. It made me laugh because, Gotti, if you ever, I always look at these Pew polls that sometimes they put out on attitudes. It's always very interesting to me to get 80% of any group. It doesn't matter, any group you would choose out there, to get 80% of people to agree about something is nearly impossible. When you poll people, Americans, and you say things like, it's wrong to murder people, right? You can get up to about 90, I think maybe 89, 90. Husbands and wives shouldn't sleep with with people outside of the marriage. Maybe 87, 88. But then after that, you drop any subject you want. You drop down below 80. So it should be. It's just a signal. If you got 82% of anyone, it's a signal, and you don't understand. It's a signal. Well, I better stop for a second and examine my. And I'm not an evangelical, but it's very obvious to me the deal that Trump made. No evangelical some do, but most evangelicals don't look at Trump and say, this guy fully embodies all of my values and lives a life according to those values. He made a very clear deal with them. And he basically said, dear evangelicals, there is a movement that is trying to destroy you. It's called the progressive movement. They do things like carry out operations on children to change their sex, right? They mutilate children in hospitals. This is what they do. So they also want to destroy you. Don't look too closely at how I live my life. I think you have a place of honor and respect in the American national debate. I will man the wall to protect you from this movement that wants to destroy you. And if you vote for me, I'll do that for you. And there's the deal. It's a simple deal. If you talk to any evangelical, they'll explain that to you. That David French, I really don't think he gets it. I don't think he gets it. It's amazing to me. It's really amazing to me. But he's also he's being rewarded by the New York Times for these views. But I think he's sincere. I think he really just doesn't get it.
Yeah, it's the same phenomenon everywhere. Converts are
it's like listening to a deaf man talk about Mozart.
Yeah. So I have a very short one to conclude with, and just because the remark is so sharp, because as I said in the opening, in our discussion of the Catarsgate, they've moved to arrest journalists, and they've arrested the editor of the Jerusalem Post, Mr. Klein. And this is shocking. And you know what they arrested him for? For contacts with a foreign agent, apparently. He interviewed the Prime Minister of Qatar in his professional capacity. And that's not an enemy state. What do you want? And he was arrested. And so Shlomo Filber, you know who Shlomo Filber is. He was a state witness against Netanyahu, because they basically broke him. And now he's suing the state for illegal bodily search. I don't want to go into details about that, but he's calling it rape. Okay. He's suing the state for that. So they employed draconic methods on Filber. And so Filber now joked and he said, maybe I should also preface this with a comment about the judicial reform, because when the plan for judicial reform was on, the opposition and the whole anti-Netanyahu crowd said that this is a plan to impose a messianic dictatorship on us. So Shlomo Filber now quipped after Mr. Klein was arrested. He said, "I do miss the old days of the messianic dictatorship now that democracy has moved to arrest journalists." And he's right. And he's right. This is a new law with the camp that pretends to uphold the democracy and upholds the Secret Service and the supremacy of the Supreme Court. Do we have anything to say about readers' comments, Mike?
I have some. Do you want me to go over them?
Sure.
Because we didn't do it last time, so we should do a couple here. Although I'm having trouble finding them now. Where did they go? Give me a second. No. Wait. I seem to have lost them. Hold on here. I'll find them. Bear with me. Say something interesting while I'm doing this.
I was going to say that I will cut this.
You'll cut this.
But maybe
okay,
now we can leave it. Yeah.
Here we go. I got it. So, Ruth Nalick, or Ruth N. Alec, I think it must be Ruth Nalick. She says, this is Ruth Nalick 7288. She says, "Thanks for helping us to laugh while presenting us with such challenging political issues. Your program is worth losing sleep over." Thank you, Ruth. Then Marquez 286 says, "From what I understand and Gadi has discussed, the Shin Bet was the lead agency responsible for intel in Gaza pre-October 7. Yet they had zero human sources there. This would be a disgrace for an intel officer with 5 years seniority, but for the director of a supposedly great counterintelligence and counterterrorism agency, how is that possible? Incredible. Firing is too good for him." So he's with us, with you. I step back.
You're an American. Yeah.
I'm an American. I don't have a view on this. Galil Levy Q37 says, this is Gali Levy. She says, "Another great episode. Thanks, Gadi and Mike. Can Mike address what's going on in Turkey in the next episode? Would love his input. Please let us know when you expect another episode. Love you both."
Gali, we just did. Mike just
did. Yeah, and the demonstrations in Turkey, it's very obvious. Erdogan is getting rid of all of his opposition. He's neutralized everybody. He's incredibly powerful now. Then Kira Asimov says, "This podcast should be called Two Grandpas and should be done on a park bench." Kira, that was very mean. That was very mean. It was hurtful.
Kira, and, how do you know we don't do this?
Yes. But I'm hurt. I'm hurt by that. I don't want to think that I'm as old as I am. Okay, and then Amin Debor, 5280 says, "Wonderful. Please let Gadi have his piece. Stop pointing out his funny idiosyncratic use of the English American language."
No, I object to that comment. This is how perfect. I learn.
He's perfect. I didn't, you know what? Because of that comment, I didn't mention today when you said centrifuge.
Well, how do you pronounce it?
Centrifuge.
Centrifuge. Why do you distort it in such a way in English?
I don't know. It's
centrifuga in Hebrew. Why do you have to distort everything?
So it's when you say centrifuge, it sounds like something in a symphony.
Okay. Do I need to go back and explain that I did not mean something in a symphony, or you think people got it?
I think most people figured it out.
Okay.
And those who didn't are pretty hopeless anyway. It's like those who didn't are the people when you go on an airplane and they explain to you how to fasten the seatbelt. Don't you always think if anyone needs to have a demonstration of how to fasten the seatbelt, they're really in trouble here. They're really in trouble.
All right. So is that all from us, Mike?
It's up to you, Gadi.
Don't lie to my face. So thank you for being with us. I hope that the next episode we can do from my home studio in Tel Aviv, and maybe I'll have some interesting things to tell you about this visit to Budapest, which has become the center of an international conservative movement. I hope you're aware of that, Mike, and we will talk about this.
Am I aware of that? I was in Budapest long before you were, my friend. And
but the movement was not here when you were there, was it?
Yeah, sure it was. And
when was that?
Listen, don't you remember? Do I have to go over all this with you? Don't you remember I made the connections for you in Budapest? Don't you remember that?
But that's the recent past. I thought you were saying that, I don't know, this.
Anyway,
you were on it in the 90s.
But no, I was not on it. But more important, not everybody knows that about what's going on conservatively in Budapest. But the most important thing that not everyone knows is that Budapest is the world center of
conservatism.
Foie gras.
Oh yeah, you keep saying that.
They put foie gras on it. They put foie gras on their cornflakes, and it's cheap. I'm telling you.
Did you just come up with that joke on your own?
What joke?
About the cornflakes?
No, I mean yes, but I didn't think it was a joke. It was just
because when I tell my students that the food in Germany is not kosher, I said that there's bacon in cornflakes. I don't know why we came across the same joke. Okay.
Anyway, it's the
great old men on benches.
Fantastic foie gras. I love foie gras. I love it. I love
goulash. I'm simpler than you are.
I would eat foie gras like ice cream if I could.
Uh-huh. Well, on that happy note, for people, not for ducks, we'll end this episode. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and share our channel. Oh, subscribe to our channel. That was the third thing. And we will see you next week. Thank you.